how far people ahead of Charles. I'm just burning up my tires behind him.
Understood. Antonelli is 6 seconds ahead of France.
You know, we should just sit here, salt the whole race.
I'll come back to you. Antonelli lap time 30.8 ahead. Wanna keep the DRS to chance. Go ahead like this. It's behind 1.5.
You guys, this is not good teamwork, that's all I'm gonna say.
We swapped the cars in turn 17 and then to give Hamilton a chance on medium, and if he doesn't pass, we'll let him back. Careful with Carlos behind.
In China, I got out of the way when you're on a different strategy.
Understood. We swapped the cars.
Have a tea break while you're at it. Come on. Am I catching or not?
Need a 30.7 to catch in 6-7 laps.
Is Ferrari sabotaging Lewis Hamilton, or do they simply know how to work with a legend? What happened in Miami has uncovered a perfect storm in Maranello, and the consequences could change the entire course of the 2025 championship. When it was announced that Lewis Hamilton would dress red in the 2025 season, the world of Formula One held his breath. It was not only the most shocking movement of the pilot market in years, but of a promise. The union of the most successful pilot in history with the most legendary sport of sport. The narrative was written alone. Ferrari, with years of frustrations in tow, seemed to have found the final piece to achieve the glory that has been escaped for more than a decade. And Hamilton, after irregular seasons with Mercedes, saw in Maranello a last great adventure, a career closure as ambitious as symbolic. Everything pointed to a redemption story. However, that illusion has begun to crack with a disconcerting speed. 5 races have been enough to reveal that the marriage between Hamilton and Ferrari is not functioning as expected. And the most obvious breakdown point so far was Miami. There, more than in any other circuit, the world could see how initial hopes collided in front of reality. Hamilton, far from leading, was caught in traffic, frustrated by questionable tactical decisions and forced to deal with a car that does not allow him to exploit his talent. But the real problem goes beyond a bad career. What was lived in that weekend was the reflection of a structure that has not yet learned to work with high-profile pilots or manage the pressure effectively. Hamilton's signing seemed the beginning of a new era, but instead, it has become the catalyst for all the hidden defects that Ferrari has been dragging for years. The Italian team has not only failed to offer a competitive car, but has also failed to build a work environment that fits the demands and method of the 7-time world champion. The cracks in communication, the lack of reactivity on the track, and the technical decisions that compromise performance reveal an uncomfortable truth. Ferrari, despite their advances, remains a team trapped in their own historical weight. All this has transformed what was a vibrant promise into a disturbing question. Can this combination really work? Or are we seeing how a great bet begins to become a silent disappointment? In Miami, not only a strategy was broken, the narrative of the Renaissance was broken. And from here, the question is no longer when Hamilton will win with Ferrari, but if he can ever do so under the current conditions. The first great alarm signal was not Hamilton's frustration on the radio, not even strategic errors in the race. The real core of the problem is found in the Ferrari SF25. This car, which should be a reliable evolution of the SF24, has turned out to be an extremely difficult machine to drive. Its sensitivity at the march height is such that any minimum adjustment to comply with the ground where regulations ends up affecting its aerodynamic balance. This became evident in Miami, when the team had to lift the car so as not to violate the technical limits, which immediately compromised braking stability and traction in slow curves. The car began to show symptoms of nervousness on the rear train, especially in the first sector of the layout, where Leclerc was spent time in front of Verstappen, and Hamilton simply could not be kept in rhythm. The behavior of the SF25 in closed curves reminds a rally car more than a first-level Formula One car. The comparison is not exaggerated. Both Leclerc and Hamilton have had to perform constant micro-corrections in the steering wheel to avoid losing control in sections such as curves 11 to 16, where the car tends to lose traction without prior notice. This type of driving requires an almost surgical level of precision that, far from allowing them to attack with confidence, forces pilots to always stay at the limit of error. Instead of a predictable car that allows them to extract the maximum performance, They face an erratic behavior that penalizes every millimeter of more or less in the path. To all this is added another structural problem, the overheating of tires. Ferrari has several races facing this phenomenon with new compounds. Instead of offering the expected performance, tires tend to degrade quickly in the first laps, which forces pilots to work with used rubber, where they paradoxically get their best times. In Miami's scorching heat with more than 55 degrees on the asphalt, this weakness became critical. The performance window was so narrow that any attempt to push translated into loss of adhesion. What in theory should be a strategic advantage, the use of medium tires, became a tactical trap that left Hamilton without real options to advance positions. This set of technical problems is not casual or isolated. It reflects a design philosophy that, although ambitious, fails to balance the demands of the track with the consistency required by pilots such as Hamilton. Technology alone does not win championships if it is not backed by a coherent approach to the tuning, tire management, and car adaptability to different conditions. In that sense, the SF25 has not only failed to fulfill its technical promise, but has exposed the operational fragility of a team that continues to fight to understand how to build a winning car. The Miami Grand Prix was not another race in the calendar of the season. It was the time when the accumulated tension between Hamilton and Ferrari went to the surface with a worrying clarity. The critical sequence occurred between the laps 38 and 53, a key stage where many careers are defined by strategy and execution. In that section, what should be a precise coordination between pilot and engineer became a succession of confused messages, late responses, and decisions that seemed improvised. Hamilton, accustomed to a level of surgical communication during his years in Mercedes, found himself in the midst of a situation that bordered the chaos. He asked for clarity and received ambiguity. He expected firm decisions and obtained indecisions that left him exposed on the track. In the midst of that chaos, the most alarming was not so much the result, but the dynamic that was exposed. Riccardo Adami, his track engineer, seemed to doubt in key moments, generating information gaps just when he needed to act quickly. In a category where every second counted, those silences cost expensive. Hamilton, meanwhile, showed visible signs of frustration. Not only because of the lack of reaction of the wall, but because the strategy raised together was not respected. He was left out longer than he corresponded, which made him lose pace just when he should attack. That disconnection between the planned and the executed is unacceptable at this level of competition. And in Miami it was paid with lost positions and a rarefied atmosphere within the team. Hamilton's body language when getting out of the car said more than any word. But even his subsequent statements were harder than usual. Although without pointing directly to people, he showed his discomfort with the management of the team, pointing to the urgent need to review how decisions are made and communicated. These types of statements, coming from a pilot who has been historically careful with his words, show that the situation has touched a limit. For someone like him, who has built his career based on operational excellence, what was lived in Miami was not just disappointing. It was a sign that Ferrari, at least for now, is not prepared to operate with the precision he demands. What happened in that race left a brand, not only for what was lost in terms of points, but for what it revealed about the internal state of the team. The lack of cohesion at critical moments, tactical insecurity, and the inability to quickly adapt to career conditions showed that Ferrari remains a team that reacts more than he anticipates. And in a championship as tight as that of 2025, that is a sentence. Miami was the mirror where everything that is not working was reflected. And if they do not change soon, it will also be the point from which the definitive fracture between Hamilton and the team begins. In this context, the arrival of Lewis Hamilton had to mark a turning point. His experience, his work method, his technical demand, everything pointed out that he would be the catalyst for a structural transformation. But so far, what has been seen is that Ferrari has not changed enough to integrate it as appropriate. On the contrary, they have tried to adapt to the pilot to their system, instead of adapting the system to the talent they have in their hands. That lack of flexibility has generated visible tensions on the track and in the boxes. Hamilton has had to adjust his piloting style, change his way of communicating, and resigning decisions with which he disagrees. And the most worrying thing is that these concessions are not generating results. The structure that should enhance it is, in many cases, limiting its ability to positively impact the team. It is not simply a communication or timely strategy problem. It is a matter of identity. Ferrari has built its history about passion, pride, and a tradition that, although valuable, needs to evolve if you want to compete on equal terms with modern giants such as McLaren, Red Bull, or Mercedes. Teams that have shown that sustained success is not achieved only with talent, but with a structure that allows this talent to develop in fullness. Instead, Ferrari is still trapped between what was and what could be, without deciding at all to cross that threshold. And that indecision is precisely what he is doing that, even with a 7-time world champion in his ranks, they fail to make the definitive leap towards excellence. The current scenario between Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari raises an inevitable question. Where does this alliance go? In the short term, the maneuver margin seems reduced. The problems of the car are not solved overnight, and the internal structure of the team has not proven particularly agile in its reaction capacity. But there is something even more relevant at stake: the patience of Hamilton himself. The British pilot is not new in this. He has lived complex cycles, has overcome technical challenges, and has worked with engineers who needed time to understand their style. But he has also demonstrated, throughout his career, that he is not willing to lose valuable years waiting for a miracle. His age, his history, and ambition make each race count. And in that context, Ferrari has little time to show him that this project is still worth it. On the other hand, there are signs that show that Hamilton has not thrown the towel. His performance in the China Sprint classification was a clear show that, if the environment responds, he can still make a difference. These types of actions are those that could keep hope in Maranello, but they also represent a challenge for the team. They must offer you the necessary tools for that level to be sustainable. A pilot cannot compete alone. And Hamilton, although exceptional, needs the car to live up to its talent. If Ferrari manages to correct its strategic errors, improve the consistency of the SF25, and offer a more coherent work environment, there is still room to reverse the narrative. However, if the panorama does not change in the next races, the risk of this relationship deteriorating is definitively real. Ferrari cannot afford to lose the trust of a pilot like Hamilton, and Hamilton cannot afford to continue compromising his legacy in a project that does not advance. Formula One is brutal in that sense. It does not forgive inefficiency or indecision. If the team does not respond, other scenarios could begin to gain strength. An early exit, a performance clause, or simply a change of priorities around 2026. Nothing is out of the table when the results do not accompany. What is happening between Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari in this first part of the championship is not just another story within the season. It is a clear warning that big names do not guarantee great results if there is no structured and functional environment that supports them. The arrival of Hamilton to Maranello was seen as the movement that would mark a before and after in the recent history of the Scuderia. But for now, what we are witnessing is a series of repeated errors that remind other failed cycles of the past too much. Talent is still there, the potential too, but time does not forgive and the rivals do not expect. This episode in Miami has been more than a bump. It has been a mirror. A moment in which all failures, all tensions, and all disagreements came to light without filters. It is now when Ferrari must demonstrate if he really wants to change, if he is willing to reform from within to offer his star pilot what he needs. Because if he does not, if he is still clinging to a way of operating that has already proven insufficient, then neither the Hamilton experience nor the mysticism of the rampant cabin will avoid a disappointing outcome. And this leaves us with a question that does not have a simple answer. Is this the beginning of a story of redemption or the beginning of another disappointment? The season has barely started, but there is already a tension that cannot be ignored. Hamilton has a lot to give. Ferrari in theory too. But in practice, that equation will only work if both manage to synchronize objectives, methods, and priorities. Because in Formula One, talent without structure rarely reaches victory. Now it's your turn. What do you think about this situation? Do you think Ferrari will reverse the course and give Hamilton a winning car? Or are we facing another opportunity wasted by the Italian team? Leave in the comments.